obviously pretty artistic as a kid. You come from an artistic family.
A little bit, not massively. I mean, my posters aren't particularly artistic. They're pretty...
Not Rembrandts.
Yeah. My dad was an art teacher.
Oh, yeah.
But he was never sort of super enthusiastic or encouraging about art. It was something that I loved doing in school, but he always sort of discouraged it in a way. Well, didn't
discourage it as a career.
Yeah, because it's not. Who can make a living as an artist?
Yeah.
So it was. I sort of dropped it halfway through school and then picked it up again, sort of during uni. And I started uni studying commerce, to become an accountant. And so, I think that's pretty good evidence that I had no idea who I was at that point in my life.
No one does, do they?
Well, I don't know.
33, I'm still figuring it out.
Well, sometimes you meet people that are in their sort of early 20s and they know exactly what they're doing, and it's like, I just feel like, fuck you. Yeah,
but the joke is that they actually really don't.
Yeah.
And they'll change. We all change what we really are set out to do. No one gets to 22 years old and finds their life's... Well, maybe there are
some lucky people.
Some lucky people, for sure. But, I mean, I think it's quite natural to float through things and find different passions and change what you want to do. And I think there's anything wrong with that. But, yeah, so you were... so you got back into doing some art when you were going through university. So,
yeah.
And then what about the... So, do you make your living through being an artist?
No, it's
these
about
days?
it's a bunch of things. I make videos for people, so that's how I make most of my rent and stuff like that. But the poster projects more or less pay for themselves. People buy the posters from me online, so I don't need to apply for grants from government bodies or anything like that. And the money goes back into traveling around and making the posters and sticking them up. And it's sort of, I didn't really plan it that way. It's just sort of grown organically, and I've realized, well, there's kind of a split between my art practice and me making money other ways to live off. And I'm sort of comfortable with that because I don't have to go, how can I squeeze some money out of my art projects? Which would be, I don't know, there's a conflict there between art and commerce. Yeah,
for sure. Even me, just when you said it, I was just like, I had the thought of it. It's not how art should be, really.
Well, I don't know. Like, I used to think, well, that's kind of silly. Like, why isn't art just like anything else? Like, but it's different. It feels different. Like, it's sort of because it's about curiosity and trying to figure out the world. If it's that and simultaneously how to make money from the world, it just feels like a conflict. I don't really know how to explain it.
Yeah, I don't either. But my gut turned when you said it. I understand the conflict. I think a lot of people probably do. So, right, cool. So you came from an artistic family and obviously took that through university and stuff. So when did you get your passion for telling stories about politics through art or trying to raise these conversations and bring them to the forefront? Where did that all come from?
Well, it wasn't until 2013 I was studying overseas. My wife and I were living in Glasgow, and living overseas, you suddenly become Australian because everyone goes, "Oh, you're Peter, the Australian guy," and you go, "Oh, I guess I am Australian."
Yeah, the kangaroo rider, Foster's drinker.
Yeah, you just sort of the identity gets sort of forced upon you in some sense. And I thought, well, what do I like about Australia? What don't I like? And at that time, the federal election was on, and both major parties were promising to stop the boats. And that phrase just was just really strong in all the rhetoric. And I thought it's kind of a slightly absurd phrase, but it's sort of like from a nation of immigrants, like that desire to stop the boats just seemed, it lacked a sense of history, I guess. And so I just started making political posters, although I don't really like political art because it's so sure of itself. So yeah, there's been a sort of a struggle with that throughout, since I've started.
Yeah, I think art has to sit on one side of the fence. You seem to be kind of nearly apologising for the art that you create, but you can't have a poster that's like, hey, here's two sides of an argument that I'd love you to You know,
in
understand both parts of, and then form your own conclusion. You need to
Yeah,
bring
yeah.
emotion to people.
Yeah, no, you're right.
You can't be in the middle. You can't be any grey area.
Yeah, because the sit on the fence is it's the same thing as just not making the post at all. Here are the two halves. I'm not sure which way to go. Actually, I've decided not to make the poster. And
yeah, that's right. No, well, I was watching your TEDx from Adelaide. This morning, I watched it. I watched it when we first reached out, and then I watched it again this morning before the show. And so, when you started you were in Glasgow, and then is it true that the story is you went to London and you made the famous first Australian poster about Stop the Boats? Is that right?
Yeah. So I made a poster in the style of a sort of 19th century poster, and had a picture of a ship from the First Fleet, which I took from an old painting, and it says. Australia says stop the boats to avoid Aboriginal genocide, stop Great Britain's illegal migration to Australia.
Yeah.
And so I went down to London and stuck up a bunch of those. And they were very popular. People responded to them. And I thought, well, maybe there's something here that I can sort of pursue. Although looking back at it, what I do this with all of the posters I make, I sort of go, well, what worked? Why did it work? But what doesn't it do? What don't I like about it? And with that poster, it's kind of easy in a way to make those, because it captures a dark irony within Australia's identity, but it doesn't really offer any sort of solution, or it doesn't offer any middle ground. It's kind of just sort of laughing at the darkness of Australia's identity. And it's kind of easy to do that. It's very easy to just sort of go, well, that's fucked up. Let's go do something else.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of spurred me on to sort of make the next project better.
Well, that was certainly when I saw that poster, that was certainly drawing a line in the sand. That's a very there's no grey area in that poster. It's even nearly calling Australians, well, your forefathers are all genocidal, which is it's a big kick in the guts for Australians, but I really loved it. I thought it was great because I think, as you said, we've got such a short memory. Australia has a very short history, and it has a very dark history, and especially considering the fact that we are all immigrants. So what was it about the fact that, have you always, these people seeking asylum, and when you kept hearing stop the boats, is that something that you've always known about, the way that we treat asylum seekers? Because I particularly don't. I don't. I've travelled all over the world. I'm pretty grounded. I feel like I've seen how everyone, all the other sides of the world live. All the other cultures. But I don't really know too much about the way that we do treat asylum seekers. Was that something that you knew before?
No, it's something that I didn't know very. I mean, I think it's always been in the background of Australian politics, especially since sort of the Tampa, the kids overboard type stuff in the Howard years. But I didn't sort of pay it that much attention. And to be honest, I'm not sort of that, I don't think about it on a daily basis just because it's so grim.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, my art isn't really about government policy. It's more about the emotion which those policies are trying to service in a way. Like the assumptions that are out there within the populace about what it means to belong, what it means to be Australian, because the policy is there to sort of service those fears in some ways. So that's why none of my posters really talk directly about government policy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I just sort of follow it as I guess most Australians do. I've heard about what's happening to the Medivac bill and all that sort of stuff, but it's not really my work isn't really about that directly.